Eleonora, Edgar Allan Poe. I am come of race noted for vigor of fancy and ardor of passion. Men have called me mad, but the question is not yet settled. Whether mad is or is not the loftiest intelligence, whether much that is glorious, whether all that is profound, does not spring from disease of thought, from moods of mind exalted at the expense of the general intellect. They who dream by day are cognizant of many things which escape those who dream only by night. In their gray visions, they obtain glimpses of eternity and thrill in awakening, to find that they have been upon the verge of the great secret. In snatches, they learn something of the wisdom which is of good, and more of the mere knowledge which is of evil. They penetrate, however, rudderless or compassionless, into the vast ocean of the light infallible, and again, like the adventures of the Nubian geographer, Aguese sunt ama tenebrorum, quod an e asset exploratory. We will say, then, that I am mad. I grant, at least, that there are two distinct conditions of my mental existence: the condition of lucid reasons, not to be disputed, and belonging to the memory of events forming the first epoch of my life, and the condition of shadow and doubt, appertaining to the present and to the recollection of what constitutes the second great era of my being. Therefore, what I shall tell of the earlier period, belief, and to what I may relate of the later time, give only such credit as may seem due, or doubt it altogether, or, if doubt if ye cannot, then play unto its riddle the Opedifius. She whom I loved in youth, and of whom I now pen calmly and distinctly these remembrance, was the sole daughter of the only sister of my mother, long departed. Eleanor was the name of my cousin. We had always dwelt together, beneath a tropical sun, in the valley of the many-colored grass. No unguided footsteps ever come upon that vale, for it lay far up among a range of giant hills that hung beating around about it, shutting out the sunlight from its sweetness recesses. No path was trodden in its vicinity, and so reached our happy home. There was need of putting back, with force, the foliage of many thousands of forest trees, and crushing to death the glories of many millions of fragrant flowers. Thus it was that we lived all alone, knowing nothing of the world without the valley, I and my cousin and her mother. From the dim regions beyond the mountains, at the upper end of our encircled domain, there crept out a narrow and deep river, brighter than all save the eyes of Eleanor, and winding stealthily about in many courses. It passed away, at length, through a shadowed gorge, among hills still dimmer than those whence it had issued. We called it the River of Silence, for there seemed to be a hushing influence in its flow. No murmur arose from its bed, and so gently it wandered along, that the pearly pebbles upon which we loved to gaze, far down within its bosom, stirred not all, but lay in motionless content, each in its own old station, shining and glorious forever. The margin of the river and of the many dazzling rivulets that guided through devious ways into its channel, as well as the spaces that extended from the margins away down into the depths of the streams until they reached the bed of pebbles at the bottom. These spots, not less, not the whole surface of the valley, from the river to the mountains that girdled in it, were carpeted all by soft green grass, thick, short, perfectly even, and vanilla perfumed, but so be besprinkled throughout with the yellow buttercup, the white daisy, the purple violet, and the ruby red upshodo, that exceeding beauty spoke to our hearts in loud tones of the love of the glory of God. And here and there, in groves above this grass, like wilderness of dreams, spring up fantastic trees, whose tall, slender stems stood not upright, but slanted gracefully toward the light that peered at noonday onto the center of the valley. The bark was speckled with the vivid alternate splendor of ebony and silver, and was smoother than all save the cheeks of Eleanor. So that, but for the brilliant green of the huge leaves that spread from their summits in long, tremulous lines, dallying with the zephyrs, one might have fancied them giant serpents of Syria doing homage to the sovereign, the sun. Hand in hand above this valley, for 15 years, roamed I with Eleanor before loved entered within our hearts. It was one evening at the close of the third lustrum of her life, and of the fourth of my own, that we sat, locked into each other's embrace, beneath the serpents-like trees, a look down within the waters of the river of silence at our image therein. We spoke no words during the rest of the sweet day, and our words, even upon the morrow, were tremulous and few. We had drawn the god arrows from the wave, and now we felt that we had enkindled within us the fiery souls of our forefathers. The passions which had for centuries distinguished our race came thronging with the fancies of which they had been equally noted, and together they breathed a delirious bliss over the valley of the many-colored grass. A change fell upon all things, strange, brilliant flowers, star-shaped, burst out upon the trees where no flowers had been known before. The tints of the green carpet deepened, and when, one by one, the white daisies shrank away, there sprang up in place of them 10 by 10 of the ruby red Aushefto. Life arose in our paths, for the tall flamings, hitherto unseen, with all gay glowing birds, flaunted his scarlet plumage before us. The golden and silver fish haunted the river, out of the bosom of which issued, little by little, a murmur that swelled, at length, into lulling melody more divine than that of the harp of Alos, sweeter than all save the voice of Eleanor. And now, too, a voluminous cloud, which we had long watched in the regions of Hesper, floated out thence, all gorgeous and crimson and gold, and settling in peace above us, sank day by day, lower and lower, until its edges rested upon the tops of the mountains, turning all the dimness into magnificence and shutting us up, as if forever, with the magic prison house of grandeur of a glory. The loveliness of Eleanor was that of the seraphim, as she was a maiden artless and innocent as the brief life she had led among the flowers. No guile disguised the fervor of love which animated her heart. She examined with me its inmost recess as we walked together in the valley of the many-colored grass, and discoursed of the mighty changes which had lately taken place therein. At length, having spoke one day in tears, of the last sad change which must befall humanity. She thenceforward dwelt only upon this one sorrowful theme, interweaving it into all our converse, as in the songs of the bard of Shiraz, the same image as found occurring again and again in every impressive variation of phrase. She had seen that the finger of death was upon her bosom, that, like the perfume, she had been made perfect in loveliness only to die. But the terrors of the grave to her lay solely in consideration which she revealed to me. One evening at twilight, by the banks of the river of silence, she grieved to think that, having entombed her in the valley of the many-colored grass, I would quit forever its happy recesses, transferring the love which now was so passionately her own to some maiden of the outer and everyday world. And there, I threw myself hurriedly at the feet of Eleanor and offered up a vow to herself and to heaven that I would never bind myself in marriage to any daughter of earth, that I would in no manner prove recreant to her dreary memory, or to the memory of the devout affection with which she had blessed me. And I called the mighty ruler of the universe to witness the pious solemnity of my vow, and the curse which I invoked of him and of her, a saint in illusion. Should I prove traitorous to that promise, involved the penalty of exceeding great horror, of which would not permit me to make record of it here. And the bright eyes of Eleanor grew brighter at my words, and she sighed as if she deadly burden had been taken from her breast. And she trembled very bitterly, but she made acceptance of the vow. But what was she but a child? And it made me easy to her the bed of her death. And she said to me, not many days afterward, tranquility dying, that because what I had done for the comfort of her spirit, she would watch over me in the spirit, then departed. And if so it were permitted, her return to me visibly in the watches of the night. But if this thing were, indeed, beyond the power of the souls in paradise, then she would, at least, give me frequent indications of her presence, sighing upon me in the evening winds, filling the air which I breathed with perfume from the center of the angels. And with these words upon her lips, she yielded up her innocent life, putting an end to the first epoch of my life own. Thus far I have faithfully said, but as I pass the barrier in time's path, formed by the death of my beloved, and proceed for the second era of my existence, I feel that a shadow gathers over my brain, and I mistrust the perfectly sanity of the record. But let me on. Years drag themselves along heavily, and still I dwell within the valley of the many-colored grass. For the second change had come upon all things. The star-shaped flowers shrank into the stems of the trees and appeared no more. The tints of the green carpet faded, and, one by one, the ruby-red asphodels withered away. And there sprang up, in place of them, 10 by 10, dark, eye-like violets that breathed uneasily and were encumbered with dew. And life departed from our paths, for all tall flamingo flaunted no longer his scarlet plunge before us, but flew sadly from the vale into the hills, with all the gay, glowing birds that had arrived in his company. And the golden and the silver fish swam down through the gorge at the lower end of our domain and begged the sweet river never again. And the lonely melody that had been softer than the wind harp of Udas, and more divine than all the save of voices of Eleanor. It died, little by little, away, in murmurs growing lower and lower, until the stream returned, at length, utterly, into the solemnity of its original silence. And then, lastly, the voluminous cloud of prose, and, bending the top of the mountains to the dimness of old, fell back into the regions of Hesper, and took away all its manifold golden and gorgeous glories from the valley of the many-colored grass. Yet the promise of Eleanor were not forgotten, for I heard the sounds of the swinging of the censers of the angels, and streams of holy perfume floated ever and ever above the valley. In that lone hours, when my heart beat heavily, the winds that bathed my brow came unto my Latin with soft sighs, and instinct murmurs filled after the night air. And once, oh, but once only, I was awakened from a slumber, like the slumber of death, by pressing of spiritual lips upon my own. But the void within my heart refused, even thus, to be filled. I longed for the love which I had before filled it to overflowing. At length, the valley pained me through its memories of Eleanor, and I felt it forever for the vanities and the turbulent triumphs of the world. I found myself within a strange city, where all things might have saved to blot from recollection the sweet dreams I had dreamed so long in the valley of the many-colored grass. The pomps and the dignities of stately court, and the mad clangor of arms, and the soul had proved true to its vows, and the indications of the presence of Eleanor were still given me in the silent hours of the night. Suddenly, these manifestations, they ceased, and the world grew dark before mine's eyes, and I stood aghast at the burning thoughts which possessed, at the terrible temptations which beset me, for there came from far, far distance, and unknown land, into the gay court of the king I served, a maiden to whose beauty my whole recreant heart yielded at once, at whose footstool I bowed down with a struggle, in the most ardent and the most abject worship of love. What indeed was my passion for the young girl of the valley in comparison with the fervor and the delirium and the spirit-lifting ecstasy of adoration with which I poured out my whole soul in tears at the feet of the ethereal Emergendy. Oh, bright was the seraph Emergendy, and in the knowledge I had room for none other. Oh, divine was the angel of Emmerdale, and I looked down into the depths of her memorable eyes. I found only of them, and of her. I read it, not dreaded the curse I had invoked, and its bitterness was not visited upon me. And once, but once again, in the silence of the night, there came through my lattice the soft sighs which had forsaken me, and they modeled themselves into familiar, the sweet voice saying, "Sleep in peace, for the spirit of love regaineth and ruleth. And take to thy passionate heart her who is Mengende. Thou art absolved, for reasons which shall be made known to thee in heaven, and thy vows unto Eleanor." Thank you very much.